Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah Emily Pina. I'm the Manager of Conferences and Trainings for the National Consumer Law Center. We're so glad that you've joined us for this partnered webinar between NCLC and the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. Our webinar is the title of our webinar rather is More Students Impacted by School Closures. What should Independence University, CollegeAmerica, Stevens-Henager College, and California College San Diego students do? I will have a couple of tips and tricks for you all in viewing and listening to this webinar. So just so that you know, if you didn't hear in the beginning, we are recording this webinar and we will make it available after the fact if you aren't able to stay the entire time or if you'd like to watch it again. We are using closed captioning as well, as you see at the bottom of your screen. You can change your own preferences related to closed captioning in your Zoom control panel by clicking the little CC button and then changing your preferences, making those closed captions bigger or smaller or making them disappear altogether. If you are having trouble hearing us or hearing any of the presenters as we move through today, I'll encourage you first to adjust your own volume settings on the device that you're listening on. If you're using a headset, you can try unplugging it and replugging it back in. And if you are continuing to experience issues, you can try leaving the webinar and rejoining as well, as kind of like a last measure to take. You also can change your own view in Zoom. You can change it to speaker if you'd like to only see the speaker who's currently speaking, or you can choose gallery if you'd like to see the speakers in more of a grid version. And finally, I will let you know that we are going to be accepting questions in the Q&A box. The chat is available for you if you'd like to chat with your co-attendees. But please do submit questions, whether IT, admin, or substantive, in that Q&A box for your presenters. And please do know that we will get to as many questions as we can, but there may be some that we just don't have time to get to. We are going to be providing a link to the materials in the chat. I'll be doing that as soon as I finish this kind of intro presentation. And we will also be saving that chat transcript because sometimes our presenters will drop resources in the chat. So please know that we will be sharing that out as well. So at this time, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Kira Taylor, a staff attorney at the National Consumer Law Center, to introduce herself and get us started.
Thank you so much, Sarah Emily. What a wonderful way to set up this conversation. We did have one question in the chat around where things will be saved. Sarah Emily, if you could just speak to that.
Where the materials will be saved? Oh, the recording. Yep. So we're going to email that recording out after the fact to everybody who registered for this webinar. We'll also put it in NCLC's archives on NCLC's website.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, so like Sarah Emily said, I am a staff attorney here at the National Consumer Law Center, and I work within the Student Loan Borrower Assistance Project. And I am here with my wonderful colleague, Robin Smith. And so, Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Smith. I'm a senior attorney at Legal Aid Foundation of LA, and I work with Kira also as of counsel at National Consumer Law Center. She's going to go ahead and start out the presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know after working with other students who have attended closed schools that this time can be really chaotic and confusing. And so our goal in this conversation and in this webinar is to provide you with as much information as possible about your rights and your options. This isn't legal advice. This is just education about your options. So with that, I'm going to dive into our webinar and our PowerPoint. So here we go. Many of you are likely students from Independence University, CollegeAmerica, Stevens-Henager College, or the California College of San Diego. These schools were all managed by the Center for Excellence in Higher Education, or CEHE, and it was announced that they're closing on August 1st. I would love to know what has brought you to this webinar. And so Sarah Emily is going to share a poll so we have a better sense of who's in the room. So if you could let us know if you're a student, if you're an employee from those schools, if you're a parent, if you're an attorney or a student advocate, if you're government staff, or if you're a member of the press, that would be really helpful for us. Or if you're other, if we didn't capture your category.
Great, so we've got some good responses coming in. A little over 50% of our audience has completed the poll. Thanks so much for doing that.
Wonderful, and I see that we're already getting some questions in the Q&A. Keep them coming.
Great, so I'm gonna close this poll out. Thanks so much to everyone who took it. I will remind you that we are not sharing these results out to the audience, but we will be sharing it with the presenters.
Wonderful. So we have a nice collection of people. We have many students who are in the webinar today, a couple of student advocates, a couple of government officials, et cetera. And so we really hope that this information is helpful to you today, but we also have other resources that we will be sharing. And Sarah Emily, if you could share that folder, that would be wonderful.
Yep, it's all set. It is in the chat.
Fabulous, thank you. And one second, my computer, I'm having a snafu. Okay, there we go. So we're going to be discussing a whole bunch of things today because you do have a whole bunch of options right now, and they're not time-sensitive options. So here's the gist of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be warning you about scams. We don't want you to be subject to debt relief scammers in this time, because much of the relief that, well, almost all of the relief that we're discussing is free. You don't need to pay anybody for it. We're going to be discussing transferring credits and teachouts. We're going to be talking about how to obtain school records. We're going to be talking about closed school discharges and ways to discharge your federal student loan debt. We're going to be talking about GI Bill restoration. We're going to be talking about what to do with your private student loans. We're going to be discussing state tuition recovery funds, and then borrower defense to repayment, which is another way to discharge your federal student loan debt. And then where to seek help if things don't go the way that they're supposed to, and where to file complaints. So we've got a lot of topics to cover, but also this is a lot of information. It can be very overwhelming. And again, you have additional resources that you can take with you after this webinar. So let's dive into debt relief scams. We hear from a lot of students that attend closed school discharge that their phone starts blowing up, their email starts blowing up with people offering to get them debt relief in exchange for a fee. But you should know a couple of fundamental things. Number one, your federal loans are going to be in a grace period for 6 months after the school has closed, okay? If you have private loans, you can also ask for a forbearance if you start receiving collection letters. And you don't need to rush into enrolling anywhere else. You can take your time to weigh your options. If you want to transfer credits, you can explore public schools. Oftentimes, community colleges and public schools in your area may offer the same programs, and they may be less expensive. And also, they may be of higher quality, and they may have a better alumni network than other for-profit schools. So you really want to be careful to compare where you're thinking about going next to make sure that it's a quality investment and that it's really going to deliver on what you put into it. And then the other piece to really strongly consider is that you have these rights to a federal loan discharge. I cannot emphasize enough what an incredible tool that is and what an incredible opportunity that is. And so I encourage you to really consider whether or not that's right for you. The thing about those discharges is that they enable you to start over, especially if you can't transfer all of your credits. And so I think they're a really great opportunity. Now, here are the things to watch out for. We often hear from folks who are like, well, how do I know when I'm getting scammed? How do I know what's legitimate from what's not? So here are the things that we say are the typical flags. If a business promises that it's going to get your loans forgiven, but it's going to charge you money, you need to watch out. Chances are it's an illegal scam. The federal loan discharges that we're going to discuss today, again, are totally 100% free to apply for. You should be aware of emails, texts, phone calls, and internet ads that you start getting that are unsolicited. How did they figure out who you are? Like automatically, that should send up a red flag for you. And again, the federal debt we're talking about is totally free. So be suspicious of somebody who tells you to pay for something that you could otherwise get for free. All right. So with that, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is transferring credits in Teachout. And we're going to turn to Robin.
Hey, everybody. I will be on phone. You won't be able to see me just because I'm having some internet issues. So everyone's been asking fantastic questions, and we are actually going to answer a lot of them in the context of this presentation. And I do understand all of you are really anxious. This is an awful experience. I'm sorry this is happening to you. And I know many of you have worked really hard at Independence University or the other schools you attended and spent a lot of time on this. So this is really tough, and it's tough to consider a closed school discharge, but it is an option that we want to make sure you understand. So can you change the screen? Okay. So first of all, one of the big things that's happening right now is that I know you are all getting messages and being encouraged to transfer your credits and re-enroll in other schools. However, you should be cautious about transferring credits, because if you transfer credits, you could become ineligible for a closed school discharge, and we will explain how this happens later. We wanted to warn you that if the school is pressuring you to enroll right away without giving you time to think about it, to take home documents to look over, to explore your options, then watch out. This is a red flag that you are looking at a predatory school. Good schools will give you time to make a decision. They will not pressure you to enroll right away. Finally, if you do transfer, make sure you get in writing the number of credits the school will accept before you enroll. We have seen situations with for-profit colleges in particular say they will accept all credits, and then later they don't do so, and they tell the student they'll have to retake those classes and charge for them. So you need to make sure, especially if you're going to a for-profit school, to get it in writing how many credits are being transferred. So I also know that the word that some of the schools that are recruiting you are throwing around is the word teach out. Teach out is a special term which under the federal regulations, which means that a school agrees to finish teaching the term that you have already paid for, but you were unable to complete. So whatever term you're in now, whether it's a semester or a quarter that you were unable to complete because suddenly your school closed, a teach out means that that other school is going to finish teaching you or reteach you for that semester and not charge you. For this to work, however, for it to be an actual teach out, it has to be approved by an accreditor and it, depending on where you live, a state agency. If it is not, then the federal loans that have already been taken out for this semester or quarter will not be transferred to pay for the rest of your semester teach out. Also be aware that a teach out means that after you complete your semester or term that you were unable to complete at the closed school, you will still have to pay for the rest of your schooling before you graduate. Finally, you should know that if you participate in a teach out, you will not be eligible for a federal closed school discharge unless you withdraw from the teach out after you start it and before you finish it. But you cannot apply for a discharge while you're enrolled or if you complete that teach out and graduate. We have been looking at some of the communications that you have been getting both from your schools, from CEHE, and from some of the other schools that are recruiting you. First of all, you should know that transfers to South University or Miami International University of Art and Design are not currently approved as teach outs as far as we know today. They have not been approved for any teach outs by an accreditor or a state agency. Please also know that my understanding is these schools may not offer your specific program. So if that's the case, you cannot get a teach out there because the teach out would have to be in your same program. Finally, you should know that these are both for-profit schools, which means that they are more likely to engage in fraud and provide a low-quality education. This is statistically shown that for-profit schools are not as good often as their public or nonprofit counterparts. So that is why we encourage you to look at all your options, especially the public ones in your areas, because those can also be a lot cheaper depending on the program you're enrolling in. If you are looking at other options for other schools, as I said, consider your public school options, talk to your local employers, do all of this research to make sure that you're not going to be in another program that suddenly closes or provides you with a bad education. These are the kinds of research you can do to make sure that the degree or credential that you earn is worth something in the employment community that you're looking at. Make sure also that you take home and review whatever papers the school wants you to sign. You should be able to take everything home and look at it before you enroll anywhere. And if a school won't let you do that, it is not a good idea to enroll there. And you need to take the time to figure out what is financially in your best interest. This is a big decision. It is a big investment for you. So I encourage you to look at the costs of all your different options and see what really is going to work for you. Again, as we mentioned before, I just want to reiterate, you have a 6-month grace period before your federal student loans start asking for payment. Because you are in a closed school discharge population, also, you may have extra time because your loan servicers will be required to notify you and give you time to apply if you're eligible for a closed school discharge. So really, it's important for you to take the time you need and not rush into anything. And I can't emphasize that more. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Getting your student records. I did see some questions about this. I've been looking around and trying to figure out, you can go to the next slide, how you all can get your student records, because there's nothing on any of these schools' websites. There's nothing on the Department of Education's websites. There's nothing anywhere about how you can request your loan documents. As soon as you do find out, you should not only obtain your transcripts, those are obviously very important, but you should ask for all of your student records. You may need these student records to apply for and obtain a discharge. So very important. In addition, you do have a right to inspect your records under federal law. So make sure that you go ahead and do this. And if you have problems getting your records, you should definitely file a complaint with the Department of Education. Now, I understand that perhaps parchment is a way you can get your transcripts. If that's the case, great, but I'm not sure that parchment's going to have all of your student records. And as I mentioned in list here, it's very, very important, and I can't emphasize enough, for you to get all of your student records if you can. The key documents you really should ask for are your enrollment agreement, any student loan agreements and records that you have, including if you obtained an EduPlan loan. It's very important for you to get those documents. Everything that you signed, a student ledger, which is basically an accounting of all the money that was paid on your behalf to the school, as well as all of the money that they charged you. Here's an example. It's kind of a weird document, but here's what it would look like, and very important for you to have to understand exactly what the school used the money for that it obtained on your behalf. If you could go back, Kara. Transcript obviously is important. If you withdrew before the school closed, or if you were on a leave of absence when the school closed, very important to get those records, as well as attendance records, to show your right to a closed school discharge, which we will discuss in a moment. And also very important to get, if you can, all your communications with the school, including emails and texts. I know a lot of you were online, and that is why sometimes these kinds of communications can be very helpful to you showing your right to a closed school discharge. Okay, so everyone's been asking about how do they get their documents. We don't know yet. Of course, now I'm hearing that some, possibly you have been told you can get your transcripts from parchment. If you don't have access to all the documents you need, you don't know who to contact, here's what you can do. I would say call or email your school's accreditor, ACCSC. Here's information about how to do so. We are also sharing this information in a list we're going to provide to you with all of these websites and contact information in the materials, because I know you can't get to this and write this down right now. It's too much. You can contact your local state higher education agency. Every single state has a higher education agency that is charged with overseeing for-profit and nonprofit colleges. If you aren't getting access to the documents, it's their job to help you do that. So here's where you can go to find a list of your state's agency to contact them. Another contact is the Student Loan Ombudsman of the Department of Education. You can complain there if you are unable to obtain your student records by submitting a complaint. You can call. We'll also provide you with an email you can use. And finally, it's really important for your legislators, whether they're state and especially federal, to understand if you are having issues, if you are stressed out, what are your experiences are, because they're the ones that make the laws. They're the ones that should be ensuring that these kinds of issues don't happen to students like you. So I encourage you to share your experiences with your state and federal lawmakers to find out who they are. You can check this website, type in your address, and it will tell you. Again, I can't emphasize how important this is, because they're the ones that write the laws. And if you aren't getting what you think you should be getting, then you need to call them and tell them.
Robin, before we move on, we have
Yes.
a couple of questions about transferring and teach outs. So first, we have a couple questions around if there are any schools that are approved for a teach out right now.
Not that I know of. Of course, what you can do is continue to check both the schools' websites, and the Department of Education should eventually post a special website just for CEHE students, telling you about all the different options. So I would check with the Department of Education on their student loan, sort of studentaid.gov website, which we will provide in a minute, to monitor the situation. The other option is you can call the school's accreditor, ACCSC, and ask them. They also should be providing this information, because they would be the ones that would approve any kind of teach out.
That's great advice. And then we have another question around what program you would go to in the teach out. Does it have to be the exact same program, or is it just you accept a teach out and then you can be placed in a different program?
No, it would have to be the same or similar program, because basically they would be taking all of your previous education and teaching from there. If it's a completely different program, you would probably have to start over, so it won't count as a teach out. So it would be your exact same or a very similar program to constitute a teach out.
Thanks. And then there are a couple of other questions around do other schools accept credits from closed schools? And the other question is, how do you research whether or not you're going to a quality school or whether or not you're transferring to a quality school?
These are great questions. First of all, the only way you can find out if your credits are transferable is to talk to the school that you want to transfer to. There's no method. Just because your school's accredited doesn't mean everyone else is going to accept their credits. It's really up to the school by school basis. Unfortunately, there's no other way to figure it out. What was the second question? I don't remember.
How do you research whether?
Good question. So we should post a link somewhere, but there was a prior slide that I had that you can do. One thing is you can go to the school's website, whatever school you're looking at, and you can look at sort of their statistics, what percentage of their students default on their federal loans, how many of their students graduate, how many of the students get jobs. If you see concerning percentages in those areas, it's an indication the school is bad. You can also just do a Google on the school, see if it's ever been investigated for fraud. You can talk to employers in your area to see, do they respect the degree, or do they hire people from that school? Do they respect the degree or credential you would earn from that school? That's really, I would think, the best way to educate, to learn about that school. Take a tour, visit it. Again, if they pressure you to enroll and call you nonstop after you visit, that's an indication not to go there. And ask them what kind of school they are. Are they public, nonprofit, or for-profit? If it's a for-profit school, just be very careful and make sure that they really are going to provide you what they promise, have high placement rates, low loan default rates, and a high graduation rate.
That's great advice, Robin. One other tool that I often use is the college scorecard, which gives you a summary of some of the Department of Education's data around the performance of a school that can also be useful to look at when you're trying to figure out the relative quality of the school. Awesome. So with that, let's move on to closed school discharges.
Okay, I guess that's me, right? Sorry. Okay, so here's the good news. And I know there's not a lot of good news out of this. If you decide that if you can't transfer credits, if there's no teach out offered, or if you decide you want to start over, you can do so by getting what's called a federal student loan closed school discharge. What this is, it's all of your federal loans will be canceled. All of your Pell Grants will be restored. So you won't have those counted towards your lifetime limits. If you make any payments, and none of you have yet, and if you apply right away, you shouldn't have to, but if you make any payments on your loans, they should be refunded. And the credits history, about those loans, so the fact that you even took out those loans should not appear on your credit history. And finally, it's not taxable, meaning you won't be taxed like that's a benefit. And I want to emphasize, closed school discharges are very easy to apply for and obtain. We're throwing a lot of information at you today, but I don't want you to think you need an attorney to apply for one. We're going to go over very quickly some information here, but I hope that you all don't feel intimidated. This is probably the easiest type of discharge to apply for, and you should definitely give it a try if you are eligible. So who is eligible? First, if you did not complete your program or graduate from your program before the school closed, if the school closed while you were enrolled or on a leave of absence when the school closed, if you withdrew 120 or 180 days before closure. There's a weird thing here with the 120, 180 days. It depends on when you obtained your loans. For some loans obtained before July 1st of 2020, it's 120 days. For loans after July 1st, 2020, it's 180. We are encouraging the department to apply 180 days, regardless of when you got the loans, because this is so confusing. So my suggestion is, if you are within the 180-day withdrawal period, just apply, and we'll see what happens. In addition, we are asking the Department of Education to extend the withdrawal period back to a prior date based on a lot of the problems we know that were happening at the school. So if you're interested in seeing if the date's extended back beyond the 180 days, again, go and watch the Department of Education's special page for these schools. It should establish a special website where it will make those kinds of announcements. Finally, who is eligible? Parent plus loans. If you have a parent, or if you're a parent or a guardian who got a parent plus loan for a student that was impacted by the closure and meets these criteria, you are also eligible for a discharge, but you have to apply separately from the student.
And then Robin, I'm seeing some questions come in. And I want to clarify that closed school discharges are only available for your federal student loan debt. So this wouldn't cover payments you made to the school. This does not cover the EduPlan loans. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit later, but this is just for your federal student loans. Okay.
Thank you.
And we also have information on how to figure out if you have federal student loans on the Student Loan Borrower Assistance webpage, and we have links for you as well in the folder materials that Sarah Emily put in the chat.
Next slide. So you're not eligible for a closed school discharge if you are enrolled and complete the same or comparable program through a Teachout. So if you enroll in a Teachout, that's approved by your creditor and you complete that, you're not eligible for a closed school discharge. If you transfer one or more of your credits to the same or similar program, you are also not eligible for a closed school discharge. This is true even if you transfer just one credit. So this is why it's very important for you to find out how many credits you're going to transfer and to decide whether it's better to just not transfer any credits and start over again and get the closed school discharge. Finally, sometimes what happens is students graduate right before the school closes and they don't get their diploma or degree. If this happened to you, you are not eligible for a closed school discharge. In this case, you should file a complaint with the Student Loan Ombudsman to see if you could at least get a copy of your diploma or degree. Sometimes that can be worked out.
And I'm also seeing in the chat, there was a question of, I just have one more class. If I just finish that one more class, would I still be eligible for this discharge? And the answer is no. If you finish the same program, you will not be eligible for a closed school discharge.
Yes, you will not if you complete it through a Teachout or if you transfer credits. If, however, you have to start over somewhere and you don't transfer credits, then you are eligible. So I guess I'm saying the same thing. So how do you apply? So like I said, this is actually a fairly easy process, and I'm going to go through it step by step, but don't feel daunted. You can do this. A lot of students do it all the time, and we'll give you some resources if you need help. First, make sure you're eligible. If you're not sure, apply anyway. It's worth giving it a try. So if you, for example, withdrew and it was within a period that you're not sure of, go ahead and give it a try. Second slide, then copy necessary documents. If, like I said before, if you withdrew within the 120 days or 180, if you were on an approved leave of absence, you will possibly need to have those documents to apply for a closed school discharge. Now, if you can't get them, I would say still apply because your school should have reported that you either withdrew or were on a leave of absence, but they don't always do so. So it's very important for you to try to get those documents if you can. Finally, if you re-enroll somewhere else, but you're in a different program or you don't transfer any credits, often the department wants a letter or some document from your new school proving that you didn't transfer credits or are in a different program. Again, I would apply. If you can't get those, give it a try anyway, because we are pushing the department not to require this kind of additional documentation, but sometimes it does. Second is third, you complete the discharge application. We're going to provide a PDF fillable copy in the materials. You can also find it on studentaid.gov, and you will also be sent one eventually by your loan servicer if they identify you as eligible. Make sure you keep a copy of everything you submit, because sometimes, I know it's shocking, the department loses these, but it is a big organization. And so that's why it's really important for you to keep a copy of whatever you submit, just in case. You will submit it to your loan servicer or the Department of Education. Right now, a lot of you won't know who your loan servicer is. This is because typically your loan servicer is not identified until after you stop attending, and it takes some time. Eventually, you should be able to find out who that is when you log in at fsa.gov, log into your account, and it will be identified who your loan servicer is. You will also get something, like I said, in the mail from the loan servicer. You may also get it by email saying that you're eligible for a closed school discharge. Finally, hopefully the department, and we're asking them to provide an address or an email where you can submit your closed school discharge application. This currently is not available, but again, please monitor the Department of Education's closed school website. Finally, again, for 6 months, you will not have an obligation to pay because you have a grace period. And if you're notified of your eligibility by the loan servicer, you will have additional time to complete and submit your loan discharge. If you do submit it timely, then they will not be able to collect on you while they're considering your closed school discharge.
And just to clarify, Robin, you said FSA.gov, but the new website is studentaid.gov.
Yes, sorry,
So studentaid.gov. Okay.
Correct.
So that would be where you would log in to check your servicer, etc.
And the final step, hopefully, is that your discharge is granted. You would be notified, of course, by mail or email. You should get a letter saying your discharge is granted, that all of the loans are coming off your credit reports, and that your Pell Grants, to the extent you got them, are restored. However, if it is denied, and it does happen, you have a right to appeal. If that happens, I would suggest that you contact a local legal aid office or your congressperson for help, and or also you can complain to the ombudsman. We'll provide some of that information for how to find those contacts in the materials we provide.
And then Robin, we have a couple questions about what happens after your application is hopefully granted. How quickly is your eligibility to borrow more student loans restored?
So in my experience, it's pretty quick. It can also be fairly quick to get your closed school discharge. The department usually does this fairly quickly. But if it's taking a long time, I would definitely, again, contact the student loan ombudsman, contact your congresspeople. Your congresspeople and your federal senators have a lot of power when it comes to the Department of Education. So if something's not going right, if it's taking too long, if you're not getting answers, those are the folks that can put pressure on the department to do the right thing. So always remember they're a resource if you need it. Mm-hmm. In addition, they like to know what's going on, right? So they often appreciate your input as well. Okay, go to the next slide.
And then I just have two more clarifying questions we got from folks. If they transfer their gen ed credits to another program at a new school, does that take away their right to a closed school discharge?
It will. So if you transfer gen ed credits to the same or similar program, you will lose your right to a discharge. If you transfer them to a different program, so say you're in a medical assisting program now, but you go into an accounting program, then if you transfer those gen ed credits, you will still be eligible for a closed school discharge.
So the thing to remember are, if you transfer credits to the same or comparable program, those are the two keys to remember in all of this in determining your eligibility. And also, if you're considering closed school discharge, you might just try applying too. And then we have another question of, so what about the folks that do opt for discharge? Does that mean that they're starting over from scratch?
Yes. So if you get a discharge, it means you're not going to transfer any credits. So you're likely starting over from scratch wherever you go, unfortunately. And I know that's really distressing because a lot of you have spent so much time, but that's just the reality sort of how this works out.
And then just, we are getting so many great questions here. I want to make sure, just one more. If your servicer tells you that they're not aware of the school closing, you would then go and complain to all of those authorities that we listed previously.
Right, and you may hear that quite a bit. So if you hear that, you should definitely file a complaint so that those servicers get on board in giving correct and accurate information to students that call them.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on. Now, there are, fortunately, there are other forms of payment that you would use to pay for your tuition when you go to school. One of those is GI Bill benefits. And fortunately, due to a recent change in the law, there is a closed school equivalent in the GI Bill context. So if you were eligible, so if you weren't able to complete your program and you were enrolled within 120 days before August 1st, and you don't transfer 12 or more credits, you can submit an application to the Veterans Administration to get your GI Bill benefits restored, which is great. There's an application on the VA website. However, the one thing you should note is that the application is out of date and the website is not accurate. And so you can get all of your GI Bill benefits restored if you fulfill these criteria. And so you should apply if you're interested in restoring your GI Bill benefits. But just keep your eyes peeled because they should be updating that information hopefully soon. But in the meantime, you can still use the old application to apply.
Okay, now private student loans. Okay, so go ahead and switch it. Great, thank you. So private student loans, what are they? They are not government loans. How do you know? Well, let me explain. They're not government loans. They're loans made by your school. For example, EduPlan. Many of you probably obtained EduPlan loans or made the payment plans. Those are considered private student loans, or should be. If they were made by a bank like Wells Fargo, credit unions, or other financial services companies, how do you tell? First of all, you can go on to the studentaid.gov website and log on. And if those loans are not listed there, that means they're probably private student loans. They will not be listed on the federal loan website. Another easy way to tell is, did you get a Truth in Lending Act disclosure statement? And I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. If you did, that means it's a private student loan. Finally, if you can always check your free annual credit report by one of the 3 big creditor or credit report agencies at annualcreditreport.com. That's a great way to tell sometimes if it's a private loan, but be aware, they're not always reported to credit reporting agencies. So if it's not listed, it doesn't mean it's not private. But that if it is listed, you can often tell what it is. Here's what a Truth in Lending Act statement looks like. If you got one of these, then it's a private loan. So unfortunately, it's very complicated what your options are with respect to private loans. The reason is it depends on a number of things. It depends on who made the loan. Was it your school or was it some other lender? There are different laws that apply to each, and your rights vary. It also depends on your own state's law and the terms of any loan agreement you signed. So there's no easy answer. What I suggest is that you ask your private loan holder for a closed school cancellation and ask them how to apply. Ask for forbearance. While you figure this out, they're not required to give you any kind of forbearance. They're probably going to start charging you right away, but go ahead and ask for one. You may need to seek legal help. And so again, we're going to provide you some information about where to find legal help. It's very difficult to find because legal services organizations are underfunded, but it's worth giving it a try. What I would say is if you receive collection letters or payment notices, or if your loan holder does not give you helpful information about debt cancellation, like I said, seek legal help. I encourage you to file a complaint with the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They are in a very good position to possibly help you with this issue, especially the more of you that file complaints, the better. So definitely file a complaint with them, possibly file a complaint with your state attorney general. And a lot of you in your states have what are now called student loan ombudsmen. If you file a complaint with them, they also may be able to get involved to get an answer for you. So I think really what is going to be key for you is the first one. If you can only file one complaint, do it with the CFPB and seek legal help. But the good news, I want to go back just a bit, is I think it likely that a lot of you will be eligible for cancellation, either partial cancellation or full cancellation for your private student loans. It does depend on state law, but you really do need to seek this. Don't give up. If you're not getting answers also that you can't find an answer, I encourage you to contact your lawmakers. Again, they don't know that there's problems with private student loans when a school closes unless they hear from you. If they hear from you, maybe they'll pass a law about it. So very important for you to share, again, those experiences and file complaints with them as well. A lot of your states have what's called state tuition recovery funds. Some have bonds. Go ahead to the next one. These bonds or state tuition recovery funds are all defined by your state. So they vary by each state. Some of them will reimburse and pay off your private student loans. Some of them may pay back any cash or credit card payments you made to the school. Some will cover grants, so that if, for example, you got a Pell Grant to go to one of these schools, you might be eligible to get that money restored so that you can use it somewhere else. They can cover federal student loans and GI Bill funds. So to find out if your state provides this kind of help, check with your local state higher education agency. Again, we provide a list of states with STRIF funds and those agencies on the Student Loan Borrower Assistance website, which is located here. We will also provide this website in the materials, a link. I do want to mention California. California has the strongest student tuition recovery fund in the country. And so I encourage you to consider applying if you are in California for relief. To be eligible, you have to be a California resident. You have to been enrolled or on a leave of absence when the school closed or withdrew within 120 days prior. You must have attended a school that was required to register or be licensed by the state agency, which is the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education. You have to submit an application within 4 years. And a really important thing to notice is it will reimburse for partial credit transfers. That means if you are in California and say you transfer half your credits, but you can't transfer the rest, you can apply to the Strife for a partial payoff and refund of your federal loans, your Pell Grants, all of those things based on the number of credits you were unable to complete. More information is located on the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education's website. You do have to apply and you do have to submit documentation, but this is definitely something you consider if you're in California. Which Center for Excellence in Higher Education schools are covered by Strife? We know that the California College of San Diego is covered. So if you were a student at that school, you should be eligible for Strife relief in California if you meet those criteria. If you went to one of the others, those are nonprofits and were online schools for Californians. So we don't know right now if you are eligible. The Bureau is saying you are not. We are researching to find out if there's a way that we can convince them to make you eligible. What I would say is go ahead and apply and see what happens. And if more people apply, it's more likely too that maybe our legislature would make you eligible retroactively. So I encourage folks in California to apply, even if you went to one of the, if you went to a different school than the California College of San Diego. Finally, in California, we have an Office of Student Assistance and Relief that you can contact for help on Strife or other questions, and this is their website.
All right, well, what a great tool. I mean, I was also seeing questions, Robin, coming in about private loans and EduPlan loans. And so I guess the takeaway there is you want to check out whether or not your state has a Strife to see whether or not those things, whether or not you could get paid to cover the payments made towards those things.
Yes, that's right. But also don't forget that you should contact your private loan holder, whoever it is. So if you got, for example, a bank from Wells Fargo, contact Wells Fargo and say, can I get a closed school discharge? For the EduPlan right now, it's going to be hard for you to contact anyone, but I would stay, keep an eye on the news about those loans and also possibly seek help from a local legal aid. Hopefully there will be some kind of resolution for people, some kind of global resolution for people that are closed school students that have EduPlan loans. One other thing you should consider is filing a complaint about them with your AG's office, because your attorney generals are in the position to work out some kind of global resolution on those loans, EduPlan loans. So consider filing a complaint with them if you have an EduPlan loan.
Thank you. So now there may be folks on this call who did complete their program or who attended a couple years ago and they weren't enrolling within the window to be eligible for a closed school discharge. I think one thing is that if you are eligible for a closed school discharge and you're willing to do that, right, it is a much faster way of getting relief and it's a much more straightforward application. But we wanted to give you as much information as possible about your rights. And one of those things is a borrower defense to repayment. So what is a borrower defense to repayment? This is the tool that you can also use to discharge your federal loans if your school defrauded you or violated state law. If you can say that the school committed fraud, committed deceptive or illegal practices, or breached their contract with you, you could assert a borrower defense to the Department of Education to discharge all of the federal loans that you took out to attend that school. If the Department of Education grants your claim, you can get a partial or full discharge of your federal student loan debt. Again, this isn't the private student loan debt, so you'd have to look at some of those other tools like Strife and the other resources that Robin mentioned around your private student loans. A granted claim could also include a refund of amounts paid on those federal loans borrowed to attend the school, and again, a removal of negative credit history. So it's a really wonderful tool. Now, here's the thing. Here's why this is so much more complicated than closed school discharge. The regulations have been switching, okay? And if you borrowed loans before July 1st, 2020, there's a different set of regulations that apply to you than if you borrowed loans after July 1, 2020. They are complicated, and so we're going to give you advice that would keep you in good stead under either regulations. More is almost always better in this case. And we're going to give you the gist of what you would need to say in these applications. But one thing you should know is that the regulations that apply after July 1, 2020 are much harder. So you want to be as detailed as possible. You want to provide as much information as possible. For that reason, you also, if you can avoid it, do not consolidate your loans, because once you consolidate your loans, this newer set of regulations that were passed after July 1, 2020 would apply. Now, these regulations are already embroiled in a lawsuit right now in the Southern District of New York. So also watch the news to see what's going to happen with the borrower defense regulations. So again, this is a tool that is supposed to cover students who are defrauded or cheated by their school. So regardless of which standard applies, here's really what you want to do. Here are your 3 takeaways, okay? On the application, you need to provide as much information as possible about how your school misled you and cheated you. You want to say what you were told or who told you and what they told you, what advertisements you saw, what videos you saw, anything that the school was putting out that you relied on when you were enrolling, you want to include that in your application. You want to say if those things made you enroll, i.e., did you rely on what you saw when you were enrolled? Did you believe what the school was telling you? And then you also want to explain how it was misleading or dishonest. So if they told you that you would be qualified for a certain job or a certain career, and then that wasn't true, you should explain that in your application. You really want to walk the Department of Education through your claim step by step and through all of your thinking. You should also try to include documentation if you have it. So if you have emails, text, take a picture, attach it to that application, take to Google, find advertisements, find those videos. YouTube, Google, all of those search tools are incredible tools to you as you're applying for a borrower defense. And also make sure that you explain how you were harmed. You need to explain all of your thinking to the Department of Education in asserting your claim and asserting why what the school did was wrong for you and how it hurt you. Those 3 things are so important. So again, as much information as possible. Attach that documentation from the school and explain how you were harmed in as much detail as possible. You can apply either in a PDF or in a digital application. And on the PDF, you can attach pages. So really, the sky's the limit. More is almost always better. Now, you might be asking yourself, Kara, how do I know if my school cheated me? And so here are some of the common borrower defense claims that we see a lot. If your school misrepresented the likelihood of employment or expected salary after graduation, if they misrepresented job placement rates to you, if they misrepresented the transferability of credits, if they lied about the cost of education or how long it would take to graduate, if they lied about accreditation, about job placement services, if they told you you had to enroll right away or else you were going to miss an awesome opportunity, if they told you that they would provide you with an internship and then they didn't, or anything else where they knew something was important to you, they told you that the school would provide it and then they fell short, you want to include all of those things. Did they tell you that the teachers were of a particular quality, or that you would be able to train on particular equipment and then fell short? That would be something you'd want to include. Or did they lie about their affiliation with the military or the government? Basically, you want to think back to everything the school promised you when you enrolled, and then go through like a checklist whether or not they delivered on those promises. If you answered any of those questions yes, then a borrower defense application might be a good fit for you. Now, one thing to know, right? This is all about documentation. This is all about evidence. And the Colorado Attorney General sued CollegeAmerica and the owners of CEHE, and they won in August of 2020. Now that has an asterisk there because that judgment was appealed, and that's now before the Colorado Court of Appeals. So that will weave its way through the court system. But that is actually less important because within that opinion, there was tons of evidence about what CEHE schools were doing. As a part of that judgment, the Colorado Attorney General obtained a $3 million civil penalty against CEHE and its owners. And the suit alleged so many deceptive and illegal practices. They demonstrated that CEHE was inflating job placement rates, misrepresenting expected earnings, and then they made a lot of allegations about the EduPlan program and how CEHE was misrepresenting what the EduPlan loans actually were. They promised that it would improve students' outcomes, it would improve their credit, yada yada, and those things weren't actually true. So it's a very long opinion. It's 160 pages, but there's a lot of juicy stuff in there. So if you submit a borrower defense application with similar allegations that you were lied to about these things, you should mention this lawsuit, and you should ask that the Department of Education consider this judgment as evidence. That is very important. So this could be the documentation that you're attaching to your borrower defense application. You'll have this lovely URL in the materials folder that we are sending to you. Now, how do you apply? There is a different process for direct loans and FFEL loans. You can figure out whether or not you have direct loans or FFEL loans. FFEL loans you would only have if you borrowed before 2010. But you can figure that out by looking at studentaid.gov. For direct loans, you can apply to the Department of Education online, or you can apply via PDF. Again, the name of the game is being as detailed as humanly possible. Say who told you what they told you. Use those quotations. Explain what you thought when you heard those things. Explain how it affected you, and explain in detail how the school harmed you. You should provide documentary evidence, school records, advertisements, transcripts, etc. if you have them. And you can submit it as directed on the website. And as part of filing that application, you can request forbearance or that payments are suspended, but interest will still accrue while they're deciding on your application. I would also say, if you don't have documentary evidence, right, you've done your Google search, you've torn through your email, if you still have a very detailed description, if you have a robust description of what the school did, you should still apply. When in doubt, you should apply, as long as you are okay with the interest accruing wall if your application is denied. If it was granted, everything would get discharged, or a partial discharge. Now for FFEL loans, things are a little bit different. So you would use so you want to basically send this application to as many people as possible. Same rules apply. You want to be as detailed as possible. You want to download a copy of that application. You want to send it to Ed. You want to send it to whoever is servicing your loans. And you want to try to attach documentary evidence to your application. If your loan is held by the Department of Education, you can submit it online or as directed on the department's website. Again, you can figure out who's holding your loan by logging into studentaid.gov. But you should also submit it to your loan servicer and your guarantee agency. And again, the same issue with forbearance and interest accrual applies. If your application is granted, I believe the interest will be waived. Robin, am I correct? The interest will be waived even if it's a partial grant?
I have no idea. I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know.
So this is just to say that these regulations have been constantly changing. And so there are going to be some issues where you're going to want to watch our blog, because we will be posting updates as we have them. But these things, there have been so many changes in borrower defense, it's difficult to know exactly what Ed will do. If it's a full grant, that interest would not accrue. If you're denied, right now, Ed has announced that its policy is that the interest will accrue if your application is denied. But again, you're going to want to watch the Department of Education website. You're going to want to watch the Student Loan Borrower Assistance.org website and our blog, where we'll be posting more information. Now, here's the thing about borrower defense. Like I said, a whole bunch of policies have been going back and forth. And Ed is supposed to evaluate the claim quickly, right? They're supposed to determine whether or not the borrower is eligible. But there have been really long wait times, most because of all of these policy changes and administration changes. And there are thousands of borrower defense applications still pending. Again, this whole forbearance interest accrual thing is there. So you can put your loans in forbearance while you're waiting for a decision, but it could be a while. And so this is another reason why if you are eligible for one of the other forms of relief, that might be preferable instead of using a borrower defense. However, if you're not eligible, this is still a path to relief for you. But there's a lot in flux right now. Robin?
Hello. Okay, I am busy typing answers. Okay, so finally, we want to let you know there are places you can go for help or to file complaints. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a really dense list, so I want you all to know that in the materials that Sarah Emily posted earlier, there was a link. We have a whole list with all of these, all of this information, all of the links, so that you don't have to scramble to try to write this all down for yourself. First of all, if you have issues with the department, for example, if your closed school discharge is denied, or you aren't getting the right information you need from your loan servicers, anything like that, you and your low income, you may be eligible for free legal services in your area. If that's the case, you can go find who your legal aid group is here on this link, and you can give them a call. I can't guarantee they can help you because, again, as I said before, we are we don't have funds to help everyone. And so they may not be able to help you just because we don't get a huge amount in federal funding, or enough at least to handle full demand. There's other organizations in some areas that are also, that aren't included on the legal aid list because they have other sources of funding. And we have a list of them at the Student Loan Borrower Assistance website. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can always seek help from your lawmakers if you are having problems with the Department of Education or with your closed school. And often they do want to hear from you to hear what your experiences are and if there are problems, because otherwise they may not know. There are a number of places that you can file complaints if you are having any issues. As I said, if your closed school discharge is rejected, these are sources that you can file a complaint with the Department of Education or your state student loan ombudsman, and of course, legal aid or your congressperson or senator. If you are a victim of student loan debt relief services, these are, as we mentioned at the beginning, I wouldn't be surprised if many of you are being bombarded now with emails, calls, texts about student loan forgiveness by debt relief companies. Sometimes they even represent that they are the Department of Education, and they are not. If this happens to you, you can file a complaint with your state attorney general, the Federal Trade Commission, or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If you are having issues with your private student loans or your private student loan servicers or debt collectors, you should file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and also consider your state student loan ombudsman, as well as your attorney general, which I didn't list there, but it's another resource. Finally, if you're having problems obtaining your school documents, you should contact your state higher education oversight agency. The list, the Department of Education on the link we have provided provides a list for each state agency. So you can figure out who yours is. You can also file a complaint with the Student Loan Ombudsman at the Department of Education. Finally, here's some other informational resources. If you want more, you want to read about and learn more about the various issues we've discussed today, including student loan discharges. The Department of Education has a website on this issue and should establish a special website page for all of you. The Student Loan Borrower Assistance Project, which is run by the National Consumer Law Center, has a lot of information about closed school discharges as well as borrower defense to repayment. If you're interested in filing a borrower defense to repayment application because you're not eligible for a closed school discharge, but you were harmed by the school, New York Legal Assistance Group has an excellent guide that can help guide you through how to do that. And we've posted a link to that. If you want more information about GI Bill restoration, you can check the VA's website. As we said, currently the information is not quite correct, but hopefully they will fix that soon. And finally, if you're interested in state tuition recovery funds, check with your local state agency, that's the list, or if you're in California, you can contact the Office of Student Assistance and Relief.
Wonderful.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really hope that hearing about all of these resources and all of these tools have been helpful for you as you figure out what's going to make the most sense for you and your individual situation. Like Robin said, I'm so sorry that this is happening. And I know it's really confusing and really difficult, but hopefully this has provided a little bit of clarity. And so thank you for attending.
And one last thing I want to mention is at NCLC, on our Student Loan Borrower Assistance website, we post a blog. We have a blog where we often provide updates on all of these issues. So I encourage you all to sign up for our blogs, and we will send you a link for how to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks, Robin.
And good luck to all of you.
Yes, and good luck.
Thank you, everyone. So as mentioned previously, we will be sending an email to everyone who registered with a link to this recording, and also, again, sending out that same link I've been dropping in the chat of the materials folder. So we'll send all of that to you again, making sure you have everything that you need. And I'd also like to add my good luck to you all. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.